The MINI R53. It's fast, it's fun, and it's got a supercharger. But is it a future classic? So in today's video, we're going to be diving into the history, any common issues, and what makes them so special. Why now might be your last chance to buy one before prices begin to skyrocket. And we'll also be taking out a modified example to see if it really does deliver that legendary go-kart feel.
We start our story with the original Mini, created by the British Motor Corporation (BMC) in 1959. It wasn't just a car, it became a cultural symbol, an icon of British motoring, one of the most recognisable cars all over Britain. Its small, practical and cheeky design helped it carve out a place in automotive history, winning hearts and minds all around the world. And let's not forget the original Italian job from 1969, featuring the first generation Minis in one of the most memorable car chases in cinematic history. The film cemented the Mini's reputation as a car for daring, fun-loving drivers. But unfortunately, by the 1990s, Rover, the company that owned the Mini brand, was facing tough times. This is where BMW entered the picture. In 1994, BMW acquired Rover, and with it, the rights to the Mini name. But the BMW vision wasn't just about maintaining tradition. The Germans had bigger plans. Their mission? To bring the Mini into the 21st century, keeping the go-kart-like charm that made it beloved, but adding precision engineering, modern technology, and of course, a dash of that German flair. And in 2001, the reborn Mini was launched. The one we're focusing on today, the R53, the supercharged hot hatch that enthusiasts love. Now, don't just take our word for it. The MINI R53 was already doing what its older brother did, making waves in pop culture. It wasn't long before the little car found itself in the spotlight of Hollywood again, in a remake of The Italian Job. But the Mini wasn't just about what it did on the silver screen. The little car also became a favourite among many celebrities. From the moment the new Mini launched, it became a go-to car for many high-profile individuals. Celebrities, including Pink, Madonna, and even Prince Harry, have been spotted behind the wheel of a Mini. Adding to its cultural cachet, car became a symbol of fun and freedom, a perfect fit for the lifestyle of many of its famous owners. But 20 years on from its launch, where does it sit among other cultural hot hatch icons? And wow, this is what we're going to find out.
So we're now in the car, let's take it for a drive and find out what it's really like. Unlike later Mini models which use turbochargers, the R53 actually uses a supercharger. Under the bonnet you'll find a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder engine, obviously supercharged. These produce 163 horsepower in the pre-facelift versions. In the facelift models they'll produce about 170 horsepower. So they pack plenty of punch for a car that only weighs 1,200 kilos. And you've got to think this was back in the early 2000s. Performance-wise, the pre-facelift models take about 7.4 seconds for your 0 to 60, whilst the facelift models be more like 7 seconds, so only a slight difference. We'll cover more on the differences between the pre-facelift and facelift models later on in the video. But for now, let's talk a bit more about that supercharger whine and have a listen. So we'll drop down a couple of gears into second and we'll give it some, and you'll hear what we're on about and what every R53 owner loves. Listen to that. You'll never ever get bored of that. It's one of the greatest things about the R53. It's such a rarity to have a supercharged car, let alone a front wheel drive hot hatch. It truly is epic. One of the best things about the R53 is its handling. Everyone goes on about how it's comparable to a go-kart. This is all thanks to its stiff suspension, direct electro-hydraulic power steering. It just all adds to that raw experience. However, this handling does come at a bit of a cost. On twisty back roads, the car will be at its home. On a longer journey, 17-inch wheels, run flat tyres, because they don't come with a spare wheel. It can be quite stiff and not the most comfy, but it's the price you pay for a brilliant handling car. So, as we mentioned earlier in the video, obviously these cars were originally designed by Rover and then BMW took them over. So BMW, whilst they did bring lots of brilliant things to the Mini, in terms of build quality, they are actually a very well built car, a nice solid chassis with some really good engineering through them, which again adds to that brilliant handling and performance. There are some negatives which come with all cars. Things like oil leaks are common problems on these, so it really is key to stay on top of maintenance with these cars. Service them regularly. With the Supercharger, people say up to 100,000 miles they need servicing, but honestly I would say do it sooner. I've found cars with 60,000 miles, if not less, that have got no oil and the Supercharger's running dry. That's not a cheap thing to put right either. You've obviously got the cost of a replacement Supercharger, which luckily are still quite readily available here in the UK. Not for silly money, but it's a cost of changing them. They're quite well buried down the front. It's probably down to a specialist more than a DIY job. So that's important. Obviously your regular servicing such as oil changes are also very important, because obviously you're quite a high revving engine like these, they're going to use a bit of oil as they do. So it's important to always keep that fresh, and always keep an eye on the level as well. You don't want it to be running low. Other common things really. These engines are actually more reliable than the later engines in the R56 Minis. These use the Chrysler derived engine, the Tritec, whereas the later ones are actually a Peugeot. And the Peugeot units suffer a lot with timing chain stretch, which is it is the big problem with the later ones, but these don't really suffer with that. As mentioned, things like the Supercharger are the thing you want to keep on top of on these. But enough of that, let's go and see how this thing actually handles. So we've just arrived now in a series of twisty corners. Let's go and have a bit of a spirited drive through and see what the go-kart like handling is all about, and if it's really true. Some cyclists there. So some nice corners coming up now. As you can see, the turn-in is just instant. The response is just like a one-to-one. You turn, the car goes. There's no understeer, no messing around. The feeling through the steering and the feedback of the road surface is just amazing. Every little bump in the road, you can feel it. Coming up to a good one now. So braking in, turning, the car just goes exactly the way you want it. I would certainly say the rumours of them being like a go-kart is certainly true. I'll give you that. The way it goes around there, it's like just glued to the road. A perfect balance of understeer and oversteer. Bearing in mind we are on semi-slick tyres in the wet, and it's still just not understeering, it's turning in nicely, even maybe a smidge towards oversteer, but that's what you want from a good chassis on a front wheel drive car. You want it just a smidge towards that, just to help it turn in. No one wants understeer in a front wheel drive car. Epic is the only word for it. You must go and buy one of these. If you're thinking about it, do it. So we're now back from the test drive. As we mentioned earlier, there are some differences between pre-facelift and facelift R53 models. So next up, we're going to be covering some of those differences. So in July 2004, BMW Mini introduced the facelift version. There were quite a few differences, to be fair. Although subtle, they did make a fair difference to the way the car felt inside, and also a bit more of a power increase. First thing we're going to note is the headlights. They're both pre-facelift cars, but this one here is fitted with the facelift units, and this one here is the pre-facelift. You can spot the difference there for yourself. So we'll continue with some of the differences inside the car. First thing, we've got the dashboard here, the pieces here. The pre-facelift have 5 pieces, so you can see 3 here and 2 over that side. That's a 5-piece. The facelift actually have a 3-piece, so it's a lot more smoother. Steering wheel, this one's actually got an aftermarket racing steering wheel, but as standard you get a two-spoke steering wheel in the pre-facelift, and then the facelift's got a 3-spoke. The other differences are the clock. So the pre-facelift had a clock up in the roof like this, and the facelift you had it down here. Another thing, the onboard computer, the pre-facelifts don't have it. So on the facelift you have a little button here which allows you to scroll through the screen here, showing you things like MPG, speed, and other information about the car. Yeah, I think that's mainly it for the inside. One last thing is the door cards. They're slightly different. It's hard to kind of explain the difference, but we'll put a picture on screen of a facelift, but take note of that and compare it to what you see on the screen. So now around the back of the car, there's a couple more things to note. You've got the rear reverse light here on the facelift is in here. It actually gets moved into the light cluster on the facelift models, and that becomes, I think it's a fog light on the facelifts. So that's another couple things to note, key differences on the rear. We'll now move back around and talk about some of the performance differences between the two. So some of the performance differences between the two, pre-facelift and facelift. The facelift are actually fitted with a different supercharger, so that they have Teflon coated rotors which decrease the tolerance to make it tighter. Gives you a bit more boost and more reliability. Another few differences are the gearbox in the facelift have a closer ratio, which will give you better acceleration. And from 2005 models onwards, you could actually spec a limited slip diff. So, you know, for those enthusiasts, they really do make the difference. We've fitted the close ratio facelift gearbox to both of these cars with the factory LSD, and it really does make a massive difference. So, which one should you buy, pre-facelift or facelift? If you want better reliability and a more refined ride, then you should go for a facelift. If you want that raw experience, then I recommend you go for a pre-facelift. So we haven't mentioned every difference between pre-facelift and facelift models, but we've covered most of the main ones that you're actually going to notice. So we've got one of these up on the ramp now. We're going to walk around it, show you around and show you some of the common problems and what to look out for if you're thinking of buying one. So the first thing we're going to start with is the supercharger. Whilst this is what actually attracts a lot of people to buy these cars, there actually can be one of the most problematic things on them, if not looked after properly. We recommend oil changes probably about 80,000 miles, but we've seen cars 60,000 miles and there's been no oil in the system and running dry. I think the general advice is 100,000 miles, you should have them serviced, but as I said, I would certainly recommend getting them checked out before then. We mentioned earlier in the videos whilst we were driving how important it is to look after these cars, so general maintenance, always keep on top of it. So another thing we're going to cover is the bodywork, and in particular rust and the common areas. So the common places are, as you can see here, in the middle of the tailgate, you'll often find above the handle, you'll see rust bubbles forming. Luckily, obviously this panel here is replaceable. You could go down and buy a new boot lid and change that fairly easily, find the right colour. It's not the end of the world. However, problems start to get a bit worse when it comes to the headlight bowls, not headlights, tail lights. You start to see rust bubbles forming around the edges, and similar to looking like this here, but obviously that isn't a replaceable panel. You'll have to get that done at a body shop, and that can be costly. Other few places are things like the sills and stuff, you know, same on any car. Just have a good look round, especially if they've got skirts on, just you know, have a good eye over it. And the same underneath your rear subframe, all around there, that can corrode quite heavily. But we'll cover more of that when we're underneath again. And back to the bodywork. One problem is, whilst red is probably one of the best colours for the R53, it's also one of the worst. And this is the reason why. Red cars in general, but particularly these, suffer very badly with lack appeal. As you can see there, it just separates and makes a right mess all over the car. And you know, the cost of repairing that is really not cheap. So next up, we're going to mention the power steering pump. This car on the ramp is actually a very nice example of a MINI R53. Believe me, they don't all look like this underneath. We've done a lot of work to this, all the subframes and everything's all been restored, and the underside. We'll cover more on what we've done to this later in the video. Back to the power steering pump. It's located on the subframe, just up here. You'll know this is gone or on its way out by, if you're locking the car, lock to lock on the steering wheel, you'll hear a loud whining noise, and that is often a sign of the power steering pump failing. So another issue with the R53, and being a big job to put right, is the clutch. Obviously, as you would when you buy a car, take it for a drive, see what it feels like. Being a performance car as well, running power and stuff, they can start to slip and generally not give you a nice feeling. As we just said then, yeah, it's a big job to take out. You've got to take all the subframe out, front end off, and you know, it's not a cheap repair. So if the car you're buying has had a recent clutch replacement, it's certainly a benefit. So another area to look out for on these is the timing chain. Whilst it's nowhere near as common as the later Gen 2 Peugeot engine Minis, it can still be an issue. So fire the car up, have a good listen. If you notice any, you know, loud sort of, you know, chain sounding noises, ask the owner, has it had a chain ever done? Tensioner, check that's been replaced. If not, budget that into it being done. The chains aren't bad to change, to be honest, but you know, it's definitely down to an expert to do that. So it'll still be quite an expensive repair and definitely a benefit if it's already been done. So another area to make sure is okay, look on your MOT history for any advisories on suspension bushes. These ones here, the rear arm bushes, are very common to go. This car here has been fitted with PowerFlex, upgrade versions. But yeah, that's a very common problem for playing those and all bushes on the car, to be honest. With the age of these now, early 2000s for the early models, things like that are starting to wear. You've got another common area here. This is actually fitted with a sports manifold, but on the standard car, the cat is joined into it and the weld over time can crack and the exhaust will basically fall off, and you'll certainly know when that's happened because it makes a right noise. So just another thing to note. So the final two things we're going to note is going to be the central lock-in and the keys. They do have a different key between the pre-facelift and facelift. The facelift are a lot better, but yeah, you have issues with the keys falling apart, buttons falling out of them, not being able to operate the remote. Also the fact if your remote does operate, the car will not operate with it, so you won't be able to unlock the car, lock the car. So always a nice easy thing to check it locks and unlocks from the key. If it does, that's a great start. Next up, we're going to talk about the headlining and the way they sag. If you take a look in this car here, it's a perfect example of a car from the early 2000s, and the glue, the year and the age, it's aged and lost its stick. You can see here it's ballooning right down, and yeah, doesn't look great. It's not the worst to fix. When you've got a cage and stuff in the way, you've got to take it all out, all these accessories out the way, lower it down, peel it back, re-glue it. It's just another thing that if you can avoid, then it's worth it. So should you buy an R53? Absolutely, and here's why. Prices are still affordable. You can pick up a decent example R53 for between £2,500 to £5,000. Prices are rising fast, but if you would like a John Cooper Works or a GP model, expect to pay even more. Probably up to, I think, around for a GP one, maybe 15 grand onwards for a nice one. It's a proper modern classic. It's one of the last ever supercharged hot hatches, and quite simply, cars like this just don't exist anymore. They're really easy to modify and also quite cheap to modify, unlike a lot of more modern cars. Simple breathing mods and a smaller supercharger pulley can push the power easily up to 210 horsepower. And last but not least, the retro-inspired design. BMW engineering with Rover design. Lots of things to go through, but the main one being the central speedo is just, exactly what you used to find in an original classic Mini, and it's been brought over into the BMW equivalent. So you've seen why the MINI R53 is such an exciting car, but if you want to keep yours running at its best or even take it to the next level, that's where we come in. Here at Sports Vehicle Performance, we've been looking after BMW Mini since they first launched. Anything from the original R50 to R53, even up to the latest F56 John Cooper Works and GP3 models. We've worked on every generation of Mini. This means we've seen it all. Anything from servicing and general maintenance to full race car and track builds. Minis are great cars, but they do have their quirks. Over the years, we've dealt with every common issue they have and know how to fix them properly. So we're going to be going through some of the mods fitted to these two examples. Starting off with the power mods. On this one here, this is actually a John Cooper Works car. That one there on the ramp is a Cooper S. So it came with a standard John Cooper Works factory kit. So this had the airbox, the injector, the 380cc's, and the John Cooper Works cylinder head, along with the John Cooper Works exhaust and the 11% smaller supercharger pulley. Since then, we've fitted a 17% reduced supercharger pulley. We've had the airbox deflapped because from standard there's a flap in there that controls it. You take the flap out and it's got a green air filter inside there. We've changed the manifold to a Scorpion 4-2 into 1. This one's actually got a decat, but the one on the ramp is the same system but with the cat fitted. Intercooler, we go with on this one, the top mount AirTech intercooler, and it's the same on the one on the ramp. You can get front mount kits, which to be honest are better if you're going to be giving it more abuse longer term for longer stints on the track. But on the street, to be honest, you're fine with these. And again, fitted the correct spark plugs to go with those mods. This is probably producing around 220, 225 horsepower now. So as you saw on the videos of us driving it, it does move. Along with, don't forget, the Cat Cam 469. That car on the ramp has got the Newman phase, I think it's the 1.5 they call it. So the one on the ramp's got more sort of low end to mid range away from the traffic lights. That's where that will be in its sort of prime. Whereas this, all at the top end is where the power is. So there's lots of options on how you want the car to drive and what you're going to use the car for. But that's what's great about them. There's so many options. So moving on to the suspension and the handling of these cars, there's lots of things you can do. Starting off with everyone, where everyone starts, coilovers, suspension. So this car here has actually got ST coilovers fitted. I can't remember what adjustment these have got, but they've got some sort of adjustment. That car there has also got, I think, AP coilovers on that one, so more of a budget set. But yeah, they do the job, they make it look great, and they do, you know, for track and performance use, they do improve it. Lots more you can do though, it doesn't stop there. PowerFlex, do lots of upgrades, as we mentioned earlier. This one's got all the PowerFlex bushes in literally everything, including the roll center adjusters. You see there, bolted between there. So there's lots of options there. And if you really want to get into it, you can fit the alloy rear trailing arms, which is what's been done on this car here. So these are fitted on the GP, Mini GP1s, and also all R56 generation Minis. So these are a lot lighter. I can't remember the exact weight savings, but yeah, they save a lot of weight out the back of the car. And then obviously you tie that in with some adjustable tracking control arms, and obviously it all adds up and it makes a great big difference to the way the car drives. So next thing up, wheels and tyres. So this car here is fitted with Rotor lightweight alloy wheels and semi-slick Yokohama 8008 RS tyres. This obviously greatly improves the unsprung weight and also the grip, as long as you're not driving down a wet road as we were earlier. As for the brakes, this car is fitted with actually Porsche Boxster 987 Nun-S calipers. So there's quite a popular conversion kit out there. You can buy the brackets to fit these calipers straight onto your car, and the brake lines to convert them over. So obviously that gives you a 4-pot caliper from a Porsche, gives you a great range of pad options as well, being a Porsche. So it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade and doesn't cost a fortune. This car here is fitted with another very common, more common than the Porsche one. These are the R56 John Cooper Works, so the Gen 2 Mini John Cooper Works calipers. So these are again a 4-pot caliper. These are actually the Budwegs, so these are like a replica of the official BMW ones, but you know they're pretty much just as good. A lot of people use them with good feedback, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're 330mm discs on both of these cars, so they're John Cooper Works Gen 2 sizing, as opposed to whatever the standard R53 is. And again, we've got Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s on the front of this. These are a great tyre for road and track, along with some Team Dynamic wheels, and not forgetting the stud kit, which when you're at the track, it just makes it so much easier, changing wheels and tyres, swapping them around, different set to drive home on or whatever you're up to, makes your life a lot easier. And again, another cheap mod. So these cars are not only very customizable aftermarket from factory, there are also lots of options available. You'll do very well if you can find any two that are the same. Lots of options ranging from John Cooper Works aero parts. So this is an aero spoiler, carbon fibre. You've got obviously all the other performance hop-ups we were talking about earlier. Moving on to the inside, obviously all this dashboard here, you can get this in carbon with all the John Cooper Works badging. That's an example of what it looks like on the gear knob. So that's a carbon John Cooper Works gear knob. If we move over here, there are other options on things like that if you want to get really into it. So this guy here has got a Cooler Works shifter fitted. Take a look at that. And yeah, that just really makes it basically just makes it feel like a race car. Really close shifts, really positive feeling. And yeah, it's a definitely, it's expensive, but it's a definite, worthwhile upgrade. Yeah, so there's lots of options. Touching back on this as well, saying how no one was the same. It doesn't have to be a John Cooper Works to have John Cooper Works parts fitted, like this one here had the John Cooper Works Sport brakes fitted from factory along with the airbox, but this car isn't a John Cooper Works. It's quite complicated how it all works, but essentially a lot of these cars were dealer fit, so they'd be bought as a Cooper S, and then they'd then book their car in, take it to the place, and have either the John Cooper Works 200, which is what the pre-facelift cars, have that kit fitted, and then the facelift would have the John Cooper Works 210 kit. So yeah, so many options, but that's all what makes us love these cars. So there you have it. Yes, the Mini R53 is most definitely a future classic and 100% worth going and buying if you can. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment your thoughts below. If you're thinking of buying one, again, let us know. Thanks very much for watching and stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.